Previously, a runaway girl named Sayu began living with people in exchange of her body. But she met a man named Yoshida, who happily took her in, and the only condition is she does the chores. Although one day Sayu thought Yoshida was going to abandon her, so she ran away again, and is now alone again. At that moment, Yoshida's co-worker, Mishima, finds Sayu, and decides to stay with her until the last train arrives in order to deter any police that may approach her. They then have a heart-to-heart talk with each other. Just then, Yoshida arrives at the scene and approaches Sayu, noting that he's been searching for her. Not wanting to get between the two, Mishima lets the two go home together, but not before stating that she demands a full explanation about everything between Sayu and him. Home again, Yoshida takes off his suit as Sayu, now only dressed in a bra and undies, confronts him. Although Yoshida wants her to get dressed, Sayu refuses and tries to sexually seduce him. Wanting to know if he's attracted to her, Yoshida answers that he is attracted to Sayu. However, he still refuses her advancements. Sayu then confesses that taking in a teenage girl is more disadvantageous than advantageous, as he could be arrested if the police found out. Yoshida then deduces that her interpretation of an advantage was her body. Sayu confirms it, and admits at first she hated it, but grew to feel fulfilled by it. It's when her services become a disadvantage that she's kicked out, and she's back to square one. Sayu then asks why Yoshida allows her to stay there without asking for anything other than having her do chores around the house. Furthermore, she states how nice Yoshida is, or rather too nice, so to keep her anxiety of him abandoning her at bay, she does what she can to please him, and asks for him to sleep with her. On the other hand, Yoshida embraces her tightly, and then gives her a long, drawn-out compliment. He finishes it off, confessing he has no feelings for her, while calmly stating he does not want to sleep with someone he's not in love with. Once that is all said and done with, Yoshida has Sayu get dressed. The two then sit together, and Yoshida admits that she's been more of a help to him than she's realized. This confession leaves Sayu tearfully emotional, and Yoshida offers Sayu to stay with him until she decides to go home, and Sayu accepts the offer. Internally, Yoshida thinks that's when they finally really started to live together. On her knees, Sayu requests Yoshida for his permission to be allowed to get a job. Nonchalantly, he agrees to it, which surprises Sayu for his quick response and acceptance, as she's supposed to only do chores around the house. When asked if she had any particular place in mind by Yoshida, Sayu answers she's interested in the store nearby the house called Comfort. Happy about Sayu's decision to get a job, Yoshida also notes that Sayu may find other people there that are around her age and make some new friends as well. On the first day of her new job, Sayu is shown the ropes of the job by her senior Asami Yuki, who insists that Sayu not be so polite and call her simply Asami. By dusk, the two get ready to go home, and Asami inquires where Sayu happens to live, to which she answers it's 5 minutes away from their job. Intrigued that it's the same for her, Asami asks to one day be shown her place, but Sayu refuses due to the person she's living with might not want that. The conversation escalates to Sayu heavily insinuating that she's living with a boyfriend, but she insists that that's not the case, that the person is just a brother figure to her. In light of all of that, Asami decides to visit Sayu's house and see who her brother is. While at work, Yoshida gets a text from Sayu about the situation involving Asami coming over, which leaves him flabbergasted. Both Mishima and Hashimoto both find out about the text and talk about it, while their conversation is in audible range to Irie. That night, Yoshida arrives home and is immediately gauged by Asami, who rates him as a hot older dude. Asami then introduces herself to Yoshida and opines that Yoshida seems to be a decent fellow at least. Once they're settled in the living room, Yoshida tells Asami a fabricated story that Sayu and him are childhood friends with a 9-year gap between them. Sayu, who was washing the dishes, listens in on the conversation and chimes in when more details to clarify the story are needed. During the story, Yoshida almost lets the truth slip out, but Sayu announces that dinner is ready. Impressed by the meal Sayu cooked, Asami compliments it as delicious, and notes how lucky Yoshida is for having Sayu cook his meals. After the meal, Asami denotes how small Yoshida's room is, who responds that it'll be bigger once Asami is gone. In a retort, Asami calls Yoshida her soulmate, which upsets Yoshida and makes Sayu laugh on how well the two are getting along. Deciding to leave, Asami asks Yoshida to walk home with her, to which he begrudgingly agrees. Sayu also tries to tag along, but Asami states that she needs to stay since it's a man's job to escort a woman home. On their walk, Asami points out the obvious lie involving Sayu and him and wants to know the truth to their relationship together. Although Yoshida inadvertently confirms their relationship isn't all true, but affirms that he is in fact a big brother figure to her. Relieved to hear that from Yoshida, Asami compliments him as a good guy, and from there walks home by herself. Before they part ways, they talk with each other more, and Yoshida requests that Asami be Sayu's friend, which amuses her. One piece of advice that Asami gives is that Sayu has different kinds of smiles, and that Yoshida should be careful of them. The two then part ways as Yoshida is left perplexed by Asami's comment. The following night at the IT company that Yoshida works at, Yoshida finishes up his work for the day. Right as he was about to send a text to Sayu, Eri approaches Yoshida and invites him to come with her. Once again, Eri takes Yoshida to the same restaurant as before and questions his relationship with Yuzuha and his reason for turning down a business trip. Before Yoshida answers Eri's question, he demands to know why Eri cares about his personal affairs and refuses to answer her question until she answers his. In response to that, Eri sheepishly answers that it's because she likes him. Meanwhile, back at the apartment, Sayu prepares dinner for that night, but is shocked to find out that once again Yoshida is having dinner with Eri. So Sayu responds with, "Roger, have fun," and laments that the food she made tasted so good too. Back to Yoshida and Eri, it's revealed that Eri lied about being in a relationship with someone for over 5 years. Pressed further for more information by Yoshida, Eri details that her intuition told her to wait. However, Yoshida believes that Eri is bluffing to him, thinking she's just making fun of him. Eri refutes that notion and asks what it'd take to prove it to him, and Yoshida requests that they sleep together. The request left Eri aghast by the request. Yoshida then said that he was bluffing, but Eri admits that she's a virgin. In response to the confession, Yoshida begs for forgiveness for his impertinent request and asks that Eri not lie to him. To that point, Eri confesses that she really does have feelings for him, and if he wants to do it, however, Yoshida admits he was lying. This causes an awkward silence between the two. Breaking the silence, Yoshida claims he'll never ask Eri out again, but when the time is right, he asks that Eri ask him out instead. After listening to Yoshida's reasoning, Eri admits that she understands and promises to one day ask him out. Now changing the subject, Eri asks for an answer that she asked Yoshida earlier. Returning to Yoshida's apartment, Sayu eats the dinner she made and notes how it tastes. She then notes how lonely she feels, triggering a flashback that causes her to have an anxiety attack and causes her to rush into the restroom to vomit. Yoshida then sends a text to Sayu detailing that he's coming home with Eri. However, Sayu misinterprets this as being kicked out, but he reassures her that all she does is want to meet her. This clarification left Sayu perplexed. On the way back to his apartment, a talk between Yoshida and Eri is held explaining his situation with Sayu. Upon reaching the apartment, Eri introduces herself and offers the surprised Sayu some snacks she bought at a convenience store. Various kinds of snacks were laid across the table as the truth about Sayu's relationship to Yoshida was told to Eri. Relieved that Sayu isn't in that kind of relationship with Yoshida, the room enters an awkward silence when Eri is confused by what Sayu said and how surprising it is to her. Feeling the tension behind the silence, Yoshida leaves the room to use the bathroom, and Eri proposes that she talk alone with Sayu as she's certain she has questions for her. Entering the scene again, Yoshida is tasked by Sayu to go to the convenience store to pick up some ingredients. Although appearing to be discouraged, Sayu takes a deep breath and faces a smiling Eri sitting quietly at the table as Yoshida ignorantly heads to the store. Eri then asks Sayu some questions about her backstory, and then asks the bombshell question of how long she's going to stay at Yoshida's apartment. Meanwhile, Yoshida runs into Mishima in the streets. Apparently she took a detour from the train station and ended up there. On the other hand, Yoshida is asked by Mishima his reason why he's out so late, and he answers it's to buy some stuff for breakfast because Sayu requested it. Learning that Sayu is also at his house, Mishima requests that she tag along on Yoshida's shopping trip. Back at Yoshida's apartment, Sayu gives no answer to Eri's question. Eri goes on to state how special teenage girls are and elaborates on the reason behind it. Happy to hear what Eri told her, Sayu elaborates how for the past 6 months she's run away from her problems, but deep down inside, she wanted someone to tell her not to run away. Furthermore, Sayu mentions how she's survived in those months and until she met Yoshida, who promised to set her straight. Hearing this, Eri begins to chuckle, and then states how she's happy that Sayu has found a safe place. However, she advises Sayu that it's all right to be nice to Yoshida, but in an appropriate fashion. Reflecting on her past actions, Sayu confesses that she doesn't want to go back to it all. However, Sayu acknowledges that she cannot do this forever, and that one day she'll confront her past for her sake and Yoshida's. Eri then embraces Sayu and praises her for her courage. Returning to Yoshida, who tries to part ways with Mishima, but she asks if it's all right if she can stay at his place that night. Yoshida flatly refuses, which leads into a minor argument between the two about her being able to stay over, that escalates when Mishima asks what if Eri asks him the same question. Hesitant to answer the question, Mishima calls out Yoshida for having Eri over his apartment, and details how she deduced it by stalking him that night. In light of that, Mishima apologizes for doing such a weird thing, but Yoshida thinks nothing of it. Once again at Yoshida's apartment, Sayu asks Eri if she's in love with Yoshida. Taking a brief pause, Eri giggles at the question, and asks if that's all Sayu wanted to ask her, to which Sayu states it's an important question to her. Eri then responds that she does love Yoshida and no one else. Ever since Yoshida joined the company, Eri has had her eye on Yoshida. This makes Sayu happy to hear, because Yoshida would get the woman he wants. Sitting outside the store they bought the food from, Mishima confesses she thought that Yoshida was taking Eri home to spend the night together while Sayu was away. Yoshida denies that's the case, but then Mishima asks him if he still loves Eri, to which he answers yes. Mishima then claims that what Yoshida is doing is practically illogical then, as the woman he loves is at his house with a teenage girl he's taking care of. Admitting that it is a weird situation, Yoshida states there's technically nothing he can do about it, but still, Mishima argues the two can't compare with each other. In his rebuttal, Yoshida asks Mishima if she's suggesting that he kick Sayu out, and she refutes the notion. What Mishima was asking Yoshida was his priority, and states if he were to date Eri, then he'd have to hide Sayu. But Yoshida argues that'd mean he'd have to kick her out. After temporarily losing her cool, Mishima asks if Yoshida's love for Eri is sincere and not a saturated mix of pure love and admiration. Again, Yoshida denies that fact, but Mishima then calls Yoshida far too nice and states when you're like that, you never get the things you really want. Apologizing for what she said and for keeping him for so long, Mishima goes on her way. Finally able to return home, Yoshida walks in on Eri applying makeup onto Sayu's face. Asking for Yoshida's opinion on her new look with the makeup, Yoshida uncomfortably gives a compliment. Playfully, Eri and Sayu then criticize Yoshida for his half-hearted compliment. Later, Yoshida walks with Eri and the two talk about Sayu. Notably, Eri warns Yoshida not to do anything to Sayu as she's on her hotline now, and Yoshida reassures her that he wouldn't ever do anything like that. Before separating from Yoshida, Eri warns that Sayu is unstable and will one day unleash her emotions onto Yoshida. However, Eri is confident that Yoshida will handle the situation well, as at work he's known as the problem solver. Elsewhere at the store Sayu works at, Asami talks with a co-worker there about the new person working there. The co-worker that Asami was talking to was named Kyuya, someone Sayu had known beforehand. Sayu arrives at the comfort break room and notices the name Kyuya Yaguchi on the work schedule. Kyuya then enters the scene, and after Sayu turns around to introduce herself, the two instantly recognize one another. Kyuya happily surprised to see Sayu again. On the other hand, she denies ever meeting him. However, Kyuya states that he never forgets a person he slept with, leaving Sayu shocked and despondent. Just as Kyuya states he didn't see Sayu's name on the work schedule, and Sayu denies being that person, Asami enters the room. Taking note of the situation at hand, Asami kicks Kyuya out of the room, and with him out of the picture, she consoles Sayu. After work, Sayu walks home, and when she thinks that she had no encounter with Kyuya since her confrontation with him that morning, he confronts her. Kyuya strikes up a conversation with the uncomfortable Sayu, asking her how she's been since he last saw her. Sayu once again denies ever knowing Kyuya and tries to evade him, but he grabs Sayu's arm and demands that he come over to her house, just to talk with her, or so he claims. Although Sayu refuses to allow Kyuya over due to her not being allowed anyone over without his permission. Still though, Kyuya is insistent and blackmails Sayu that he'll tell Asami about their past actions together. Disconcerted by this threat, Sayu asks Kyoya if he will only just come over to talk. Hence, Kyoya reassures that he'll leave before the owner arrives. So as some reassurance, Sayu notifies Yoshida via text message about the situation. At Yoshida's apartment, Kyoya notes how clean it is, and Sayu details that she's the one who keeps it so tidy. Initially, the conversation between them is appropriate, until Kyoya asks the bombshell question about their true interactions with each other. Sayu then answers that in the 2 months she's been there, they haven't done such a thing together. Surprised by the revelation, Kyoya then tries to manhandle Sayu, and during this, Sayu smacks him. Agitated, Kyoya gets on top of Sayu as she reflects on how foolish she was to allow Kyoya over Yoshida's apartment, and the trouble it would cause him. What will happen to Sayu? Subscribe for more anime recaps just like this.